Some men collect trouble the way rain barrels collect water, drop by drop, until it overflows and drowns everything around them. Luther Harlan was not one of those men. For 34 years, he had done the opposite. He had dodged trouble like it carried a sickness, keeping to himself, staying quiet, and living far from other people's wants and opinions. He had built a life high above the Montana Territory, in a log cabin perched near the tree line, where the wind through the pines was louder than any human voice. That life ended the moment Clementine Rock stepped off the evening stagecoach in Copper Falls. Luther stood stiff at the edge of the dirt road, hands tucked into his coat, boots planted like roots in frozen ground. The air smelled of wood smoke and coming summer snow. October had a way of reminding a man that winter was never far away in these mountains. He would have rather been splitting kindling or checking traps, but his sister Belle had given him no choice. She had answered a mail-order bride advertisement in his name, without asking him, and without warning him until the woman was already on her way. "You are 34, Luther," Belle had said in her last letter. "It is time you stop hiding from life and start living like a man." The stagecoach rolled in with a tired groan. One by one, the passengers climbed down. A traveling salesman with a shiny case, 2 ranch hands smelling of sweat and dust, an old woman gripping a carpet bag, a young mother bouncing a crying baby on her hip. With each person, Luther's hope grew. Maybe she had changed her mind. Maybe she never came at all. But then the last passenger appeared, and his hope vanished. She was not what he expected, though he was not sure what he had expected at all. Clementine Rock stood about 5'4", dressed in plain brown traveling clothes worn thin at the elbows. Her dark hair was pinned back neat, though loose curls had escaped the long ride. Her eyes were what struck him hardest. Green and sharp, they scanned the town like she was measuring it, weighing her chances. She stepped toward him without hesitation. "You must be Luther Harlan," she said. Her voice carried a soft Missouri drawl, but there was nothing soft about the way she said his name. "Yes, ma'am," he started, but she cut him off. "Oh, don't do that," she said, shifting her satchel on her shoulder. "Don't call me ma'am like I might break. I traveled 600 miles to get here. I am not pretending this is some fairy tale wedding." Luther blinked. "Your sister's letters were clear about what this arrangement means," she went on. Then she looked him up and down, slow and honest. "You are taller than I expected. Broader, too. That is good. Means you can handle the work up in those mountains." Most women filled silence with nervous chatter. Others avoided his eyes altogether. Clementine did neither. "Are we going to stand here all evening?" she asked, raising one eyebrow. "Or will you show me this cabin your sister wrote about?" The wagon ride up the mountain took nearly 2 hours. The wheels rattled over stone, and the wind whispered through tall pines. Clementine sat beside him, quiet but alert, studying the land as if she meant to remember every bend and rise. "How far from town?" she asked. 8 miles. "Neighbors?" "Closest is Abner Pike, 3 miles north." "How often do you go to town?" "Once a month, less in winter." She nodded and opened her satchel just long enough for him to see bundles of herbs and folded bandages before closing it again. "You carry medicine," he said. "Old habit," she replied. "My mother treated half the people in our Missouri town. I learned enough to help when needed." When they reached the cabin, Luther felt the familiar pride settle in his chest. He had built it with his own hands. Solid logs, stone chimney, real glass windows hauled up piece by piece. Clementine looked it over carefully. "It is smaller than I expected," she said. "It is big enough," he replied. "For what you needed," she corrected. Now there are two of us. Inside, the cabin was clean and plain. A fireplace, and a stove, a small table, and one narrow bed tucked behind a hanging curtain. "Where will I sleep?" Clementine asked. Luther froze. "I can make a bed by the fire," he said. "For how long?" They had been married by proxy, legal but distant. His sister had stood in for him back in Missouri. "Until you are ready," he said carefully. She studied him. "You are not what I expected either," she said. "What did you expect?" "A man desperate enough to send for a wife he had never seen." "And you expected him to demand his rights," he said. She walked to the window and looked out at the mountains. "A man who builds something like this," she said softly, "does not need to demand. He just takes what he wants." Luther's jaw tightened. "I do not take what is not offered." She smiled faintly. "Oh, how noble!" The days that followed were filled with small battles. Clementine moved his coffee tin, rearranged shelves, changed how he cooked. Luther endured it in silence, though his patience wore thinner by the day. On the fourth morning, she slid a plate of flapjacks in front of him. "You are going to crack your teeth grinding them like that," she said. "I am fine." "You are irritated. Eat before it gets cold." He took a bite. They were the best flapjacks he had ever tasted. "Edible," he said. She laughed. "Such high praise. You want enthusiasm? Maybe you should have married another man." "Maybe I should have," she said lightly. "But I did not. I married you. So we are both stuck." That word hit deeper than he expected. That evening, he returned from his traps to find the cabin changed again. A tablecloth, supper waiting, a venison stew, fresh bread. "Where did you get milk?" he asked. "Traded mending for it at Abner Pike's," she said. "Nice man, lonely." Luther frowned. "You went alone." "I am not helpless," she replied calmly. "It is not safe. I followed the path you described." She paused, then added, "He said you have not visited since his wife died." "I help when needed," Luther muttered. "There is more than one way to help," she said. "He invited us to supper Sunday. I accepted." "You what?" "I accepted," she repeated. "That is what neighbors do." "I do not do social calls." "You do now," she said firmly. "We are married." That night, lying by the fire, Luther realized the silence of his cabin had changed. It was not empty anymore. It was alive, and it scared him more than any mountain storm. By the end of the week, the cabin no longer looked like a place meant for one man alone. Curtains hung at the windows. A rug lay by the hearth. Supper was ready before dark. Clementine moved through the space like she belonged there. Her confidence irritated him. It also unsettled him. The first real argument came when she mentioned Abner Pike again. "I accepted his dinner invitation," she said, sewing by the fire. "You went behind my back." "I made a decision for both of us," she said, eyes flashing. "That is what partners do." "Partners," he said sharply. "Yes," she shot back, "and you should be grateful." Luther slammed his mug down. "You think you can walk in here and change everything?" "I do not think," she said coolly. "I know." The fire crackled between them. Finally, he muttered, "Do whatever you want," and stormed outside into the cold night. Sunday came anyway. Clementine did not waver. Luther went with her, unwilling to let her face the world alone. As the wagon rolled toward Abner Pike's cabin, Luther knew one thing for certain. This woman was not passing through his life. She was here to stay. And whether he was ready or not, everything was about to change. Sunday evening settled over the mountains like a held breath. The sky was pale and cold, the kind that promised snow before dawn. Luther hitched the wagon without a word. Clementine climbed in beside him, her back straight, her face calm, as if she had not turned his world upside down with a single invitation. The ride north to Abner Pike's cabin was quiet. The horses' hooves crunched over frozen ground. Luther kept his eyes forward, jaw tight. Clementine watched the trees slide past, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Abner Pike's cabin sat lower on the mountain, tucked into a small clearing. Smoke curled from the chimney. Light spilled warm and gold through the windows. Abner opened the door before they even knocked. "Luther," he said, surprise flashing across his tired face. "Didn't expect to see you." Clementine stepped forward first. "I'm Clementine, his wife." Abner's eyebrows rose. Then he smiled, wide and genuine. "Well, I'll be. You're welcome here. Both of you." Inside, the cabin was smaller than Luther's, but it felt lived in. There were signs of a woman's hand still lingering, a stitched pillow, a clean table, a sadness that had not yet settled into dust. Supper passed easier than Luther expected. Abner talked more than he ate. Clementine listened, asked questions, laughed at the right moments. Luther stayed quiet, watching her from the corner of his eye. She moved through conversation the same way she moved through his cabin, confident, unafraid, certain she belonged. When they left, Abner shook Luther's hand. "You've got a good woman," he said quietly. Luther only nodded. On the ride home, Clementine spoke softly. "You see, the world doesn't bite every time." He didn't answer, but something inside him loosened. The weeks that followed were slow and steady, like a fire that burned low but warm. But Clementine worked constantly. She cooked. She cleaned. She fixed things Luther had lived with broken for years. She made lists, plans, suggestions. At first, Luther resisted every change. Then, without meaning to, he stopped. One morning, Clementine announced she was going to town. "No," Luther said at once. "I wasn't asking," she replied, wrapping eggs in cloth. "We need flour and sugar, and proper coffee." "You're not going alone." She lifted one eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because it isn't safe." "For who?" she asked. "Me or your reputation?" His silence answered her. "Let them talk," she said gently. "I can handle it." In the end, he drove. Copper Falls buzzed with life compared to the mountains. Clementine stepped down from the wagon and became someone else entirely. She spoke easily with shopkeepers, traded eggs for credit, bargained prices down with calm skill. "Your wife's sharp," the store owner said to Luther. "You're a lucky man." Luther surprised himself when he said, "I know." On the ride home, Clementine stared at the horizon. "I don't regret coming here," she said. "Not yet." "What would make you regret it?" "Feeling like I was wasting away," she replied. "I need to build something, not just survive." That night, she spread papers across the table. Plans, repairs, ideas for trade. "We could turn this place into more than a hideout," she said. "You've got land, skill. We could make a future." Luther did not answer, but he did not stop her either. A few nights later, Clementine told him about Missouri, about her mother, the healer, her father, the teacher, about her husband, James Millfield, who drank and gambled until nothing was left. "And he died and left me with debts and pity," she said. "I needed a way out." "So you answered Belle's ad?" "Yes. I wasn't running toward love," she said quietly. "I was running from becoming invisible." "You aren't invisible here," Luther said. The words surprised them both. Winter came early. Snow sealed the mountains. Luther worked harder than ever. Clementine worked just as fiercely inside. They fell into rhythm. His silences softened. Her sharpness dulled into warmth. One evening, Luther returned from the traps to the smell of cinnamon. Clementine stood at the stove, flour on her cheek. "You're early," she said. He stepped closer and brushed the flour away without thinking. They froze. Her breath caught. His hand lingered. The moment stretched thin and fragile. Then the door burst open. Abner Pike stumbled in, wild-eyed. Tommy fell through the ice. He's freezing." Clementine moved instantly. Blankets. Herbs. Orders given without hesitation. They worked for hours at Abner's cabin. Clementine steady and sure. Luther obeying every word. When Tommy finally slept, Abner wept. On the ride home, silence wrapped them tight. That night, Clementine collapsed by the fire. Luther poured her coffee. "You're something else," he said quietly. "So are you," she replied. Days later, by firelight, Clementine spoke again. "I lied to you." "About what?" "Why I came here." She told him the truth about James Millfield, about the scandal, about the whispers. "I planned to stay long enough to start over," she said. "Then leave. You never planned to stay. Not until you." Luther knelt beside her chair. "Then stay," he said. Her eyes filled. "You'd still have me." "I'll have you," he said. "All of you." She nodded. "Then I'm staying." He kissed her then. Slow. Certain. Real. "Hush now," he murmured. "Don't waste your breath arguing." Her laughter turned soft. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the cabin finally felt like home, and neither of them was afraid of what came next. Winter tightened its grip on the Montana mountains, sealing the world in white silence. Snow piled high against the cabin walls. The trails disappeared. The sky stayed gray for days at a time. Yet inside the cabin, warmth lived and breathed. Luther rose before dawn each morning, hauling wood, checking traps, tending what little could still be tended. Clementine met him at the door every evening with supper ready and a steady smile that reached her eyes. They moved together now without thinking, and he split wood while she swept the hearth. He fixed what broke. She improved what worked. They talked more, too. By firelight, voices low, sharing pieces of themselves they had kept buried. Clementine spoke of books she loved. Luther spoke of his parents, gone too soon, and how silence had felt safer than loss. One night, as the snow fell thick outside, Clementine set her sewing aside and watched him for a long moment. "You're not running anymore," she said. He looked up. "From what?" "From living." He considered it, then nodded. "Because I'm not alone anymore." Spring came slow, but when it came strong. The snow melted, streams swelled. The land woke up hungry and green. Clementine's plans came to life. Better trade routes, fair deals, trust built carefully with neighbors. Luther watched it all unfold and learned when to step back and when to stand firm. By summer, their trapping business had grown. By fall, Clementine traced lines on a map spread across the table. "Cattle," she said. "Good grazing right here." Luther smiled. "That's a future." They trusted each other now, without question. The night Clementine told him she was expecting, She laughed and cried all at once. Luther held her, stunned and grateful, as if the world had handed him something too precious to touch. 9 months later, on a cold December morning, their daughter was born. Small, perfect, green eyes already bright. "What will we name her?" Luther asked softly. "For your sister," Clementine whispered. "She started all this." "Belle," Luther said. "Welcome home." Years passed. The cabin became a ranch. Yet the ranch became a place people spoke of with respect. Travelers through Copper Falls told stories of the mountain man and his clever wife, who built a life from nothing but faith and stubborn love. Sometimes Clementine still scolded Luther, and every time he grinned and said, "Hush now." And every time she laughed. The same laugh that turned a lonely cabin into a home, the same laugh that taught a quiet man how to love. And in that laughter, their future lived on.